and maybe there's some stragglers coming in, but the first thing to scan here is a very quick survey with 2 questions. So hopefully you can access the survey and answer the questions, and we'll go from there. I'm going to give it a few more minutes after lunch. I think we're good? Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, he's just making sure that.
Yeah. Come into the room.
Well, chat's probably better to make sure. So.
Okay. Why don't we get started then? Hello. I'm Vanessa Turk. I'm a senior UX researcher, information architect, and service designer. I do a lot of work with universities. Come on in. And please, if you can sit in the first couple rows, we're going to speak in small groups to make it easier. Thank you. I do a lot of work with universities in health and in public services, and there's always a variety of research and testing that we get to do. So today I am going to take you on an adventure with my lovely assistant, Lisa, here. And we're going to explore all there is to know about research and testing. Some of it is experiential, which is quite the buzzword at universities these days. So you will experience some of the research and testing yourselves. Why are we doing research and testing? Can anyone tell me why you're interested in research and testing and some of the reasons why you think it's important? Chad.
Validating your assumptions to see if you're heading in the right direction.
That's a great one. Anybody else?
To learn things that you didn't know.
Good.
Stuff that you didn't know.
Yes, absolutely. I think what impacts me is that projects are about change. We have a situation, we have a current problem space, and we're trying to get somewhere else. We're trying to figure out how to change something, usually for the better, but occasionally we don't change things for the better. So, why it's important for me to do research and testing is to overcome biases. We have individual biases, our stakeholders have biases, we look at things and we make assumptions, as you said, and we may not be correct about our assumptions. And so research and testing allows us to expose that about ourselves, about our clients, about stakeholders, about end users, and really focus in on what would be most helpful. And a lot of the time when you start a project, it seems really, really straightforward. It's just from here to there. No big deal. Seems like it's just across the street. But sometimes across the street looks like this. And it's very, very difficult to understand how to actually get there. But first, we're going to start with a preference test. Sometimes a project starts and we already have concepts. We already have designs. And for this presentation, we actually have 5 concepts, 5 designs to choose from, 5 themes, as it were, going forward to change our presentation. Theme 1, would you like to go on a safari? Theme 2, would you like to have a testing and research fantasy? Theme 3, we have a quest, a little bit of steampunk. We have an underwater testing adventure. And we have a testing odyssey. So now, show of hands. Who would like to see number 1? No safaris? Okay. How about number 2? No. Number 3? Quest? Oh, we like the quest. Okay. How about number 4? Number 4? Okay. And how about number 5? Looks like the quest won. So that is a simple poll to decide some preferences. But wait, we are often asked for A/B testing. Sometimes clients will know nothing about testing, but they really want A/B testing. And I think the important thing to remember about A/B testing is we have 2 alternatives. And today our alternatives are, should I do this presentation A, without a costume, or B, with a costume. So option A, 1, without. Option 2, with.
Oh, yeah.
Oh! Our test is very clear. I'm sure it's statistically significant at this point. All right, so let's move forward on our quest. Before I go too far, I want to see what we did here. Oh, so we have a group that is interested in learning advanced skills, selecting the most appropriate methods, and how to proceed without actual testers. I will weave that into the presentation. Thank you so much. And let's go back to the slideshow. All right, so we'll start off with a scenario. We have a project come in. Maybe it's from an RFP, and it's very vague, and it's a little bit unclear what they want, but you know how that goes. We just need to proceed with it. So starting off, we're going to do a little exercise, and we're going to do a bunch of these things, and they're just for fun and sort of to illustrate different points and things. I'm going to give you a little project that if you can pair up into 2, we're going to have a little discussion, and we're going to try to figure out for these little projects, what does success look like? What is the current state? Maybe exploring the problem space, and we only do this for 5 minutes, so we're just going to do a little sampler of this. What information is missing, and what assumptions can be validated? So, look to your neighbor. You got partners? All right. So here is the project, and it's vague on purpose. So the project requirements, you can do 1 or 3, depending on how much you want to talk about. And pick this apart. What would success look like? What is the current state? What information is missing? So this might be a little bit of qualitative research. And what assumptions can be validated? And that might be something quantitative. And we've got, 5 or 6 minutes, maybe 6 or 8. Let's discuss each of these, and these are like requirements for your project. What would that look like? And they're confusing for a reason. They're unclear for a reason because they do mimic a little bit the kind of project requirements we get in. So, go ahead. Let's start chatting.
So it has to have all 3 of them. You can choose all 3, or you can choose just one to look at.
I can be product owners. If you want to ask me questions, I will try to articulate as clearly as product owners articulate. For number 1.
Well, 1, 2, or 3.
A song.
So success would be
Song to sing.
Well,
Which one?
no, I think
Perfect, all right.
right?
Oh, great.
I thought it was all 3 requirements.
I feel like the first thing
Okay,
is
so
like,
it's-
Is that what you heard?
So funny, like hilarious.
yeah,
Good job.
Oh, you choose one. Okay, you choose all 3. Okay.
All A, B, C, D.
Yes. So when you choose your question, look at which one you're doing. Okay. So the success of that question. Okay, so 1 for success. And then also all 4 is
Finding questions in your project.
Like what kind of things you can know if you're.
Yes. Yeah.
What's the current state?
How would that?
Oh, yeah.
What is the current state?
So, what is success look like?
What
Yeah.
are there any challenges?
Always include when it's
Give them a few minutes to do this. And then there's another opportunity to switch themes partway through.
Oh, yeah. Getting a pizza, something. But getting a pizza that everyone is.
So then she might look for success too.
What information?
Getting a pizza that everyone wants.
What's the current state?
But I said no, you want how. Yes, so like, does it matter? Yes.
These have time.
But that's where
This kind of sounds
the.
like a buzz.
Oh, I guess we could.
Yeah, we're kind of.
What?
Where is it from?
So going on that assumption,
You got
that success
the-
is like the
Yeah.
maximum of people taking.
1, 2. What's the current state?
No.
I'd also say like having an interface and like rewarding people
What is it?
for taking surveys. Go team by team.
Now, like the reason why it was like BuzzFeed quiz
What's the
is
team
because
say?
yeah,
Yeah.
because of the lead survey
Different people are
I think that would be success.
Well, assumptions can be validated.
Oh,
I mean, they could have
Is that
done
in
about interesting
Simba?
part
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
to talk to them about, but now you can.
So,
Yeah.
which is like
How would you
assumptions.
answer that?
I imagine success would look like if we know whether or not, how many, what percentage
I'm gonna start to.
have their.
Yeah. Be able to question.
How's it going? Are you ready to share?
What assumptions could be validated? Like, what do we could assume?
Oh,
Does everyone-
Oh, that's good.
I guess we said.
You guys feel like you've made some success?
Yes.
Congratulations on your test. If we did declare
Do participants get remunerated? Does it feel good to get something for doing some work? Do you feel validated?
Validated.
Validated.
choices, well done.
Do you feel like-
Do you feel appreciated?
I still
Yeah. Okay, good.
So, just a present.
Okay, let's start here. How did you approach this, and what were some of the gotchas that came up for you?
I think there's a lot of things that are unknown about this, but I think first off, we were thinking about both the implementation, but then looking at the questions that you had here, and so what is our goal? And I think the key thing that we're looking at is, what is the current state? Is we don't know. We picked number 3 here. We don't know how many people there were, and success would look like we know how many people had that happened.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through all the groups and then I'll go back and kind of reflect on what this looks like for research and testing. Yeah? Okay. Anything else to add?
We kind of like end up with like one of those missing informations is why. Like we had like a goal of determining, but like we don't know why we're determining it.
Because
Like,
it's
are
in
we-
the RFP.
Yeah, like are we Facebook? Are we a horoscope site? Like are we trying to like gather data or confirm something? We're
Yeah.
excited.
What's the purpose of this?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of this? Because I said so.
Product owner.
All right, next group.
Not what you want to go, I.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right, no, that's pretty easy.
Well-
You picked 2.
Yeah, we picked number 2, so we thought it would be the easiest.
And?
So success would look like we all have pizza here every before the session ends.
Mhm.
And the current state was no.
Pizzaless. Right, right. So did anything arise for you that might be able to be explored a little bit further for this pizza?
What kind of pizza?
Mm.
We're also, he was saying, well, we're full, we just had lunch. Do I really want pizza?
And is it literally for the room?
Right,
Or
Oh,
is it for the people in the room?
yes.
that's true. We also don't know that for sure there isn't pizza here. There could be pizza here. We don't know. We've got a lot of
Yes,
stuff.
could be. All right. And are there any allergies? So there's our accessibility question. Like, are there any special like allergies in the room?
Yeah. We talked about that, like vegetarian and things like that, yeah, the food allergies.
Okay.
So, what did we write down on what assumptions?
The
we could-
assumptions is like that it is possible to get pizza here before 2 p.m. We're just assuming that is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was also a question of like, who actually would deliver pizza all the way over here in the UW? Where are they gonna park?
And get up
Carry it
into the
over,
room and
you know, find us in the room, I mean.
cool. Yeah.
A lot of questions.
The same place. So we also did too, and everything that we just talked about, making sure that for what information is missing, like what are the allergies, other preferences, what's our budget, what's the delivery time, is it actually possible to meet the requirement based on that? Does everyone actually want pizza? So now we're assuming assumptions that can be validated. Does everybody want? Will the pizza be good?
Mm.
Or
Yeah.
will it be trash pizza because of all the other requirements? We can only get DiGiorno.
Right. Right. So I think the cool thing about this exercise is that once you start unpacking it, it gets more and more complicated until it gets simpler. So there is this time where you have more and more and more questions, and some of the questions are going to be exploratory. Like with the horoscope one here, you'd have to interview people to find out what their week was like.
Yeah.
Where are we getting this horoscope from? What does alignment even mean? So you can see that like one sentence could be like super loaded, full of all kinds of things that need to be unpacked. And so part of this presentation is really kind of looking at things from different angles and trying to figure out how to fill in the gaps. And for the rest of this presentation, there's a few more participations session blocks, and then I'm going to, before we close, open up what a process looks like for me, what tools I use, how I do planning. So that is coming, but I just wanted to like start thinking about how we do planning. It isn't always the same test. It isn't always the same research. It depends on what we know, what we don't know, and even your gut feeling. Like sometimes something just like, this is really slippery. I don't know what they're actually asking me to do here. And designing a test around that, you almost have to get to the point where you have specific questions that you need answered before you can actually figure out what you're going to test. So a lot of the time, and I do testing on almost every project that I'm on, a lot of the time I don't really know what kind of testing I'm going to do until we start to dig into it and try to figure out, but where are the gaps? Where are the squishy spots where I ask another question, oh man, and there's another question, and then there's way more questions. So that's the place where we usually dig in a little bit, and that's exploratory. That is the kind of research that it just keeps generating either questions, thoughts, ideas, preferences, and the way to then close it in again is to do something where we're presenting some actual options here. And to get to this place sometimes takes some exploration. Okay, sorry, I am not following. There, okay. I did it that way, okay. To stay on theme. But what if you're in the middle of a project already? What if you're way past that and you're already building stuff, and then sometimes I'll get dropped right into the middle of a project and they're already building stuff. I don't even have input until suddenly here I am. So what happens there sometimes is there'll be a specific thing that there's some struggles around, and struggles meaning conflict, maybe that there's like 14 different ways of doing things, and the users have said a bunch of different things, and we're not quite sure. But there's some kind of a discrete piece that we can get into, that we can really like, some juicy thing that we can attack. And at that point, I would suggest a little focus group, because we're focusing on a feature, we're focusing on a problem. And I'm going to give you just an example here, and instead of getting together with groups, maybe you can think about it. This is, have you customized your phone? Like, it's just a tiny little piece of something. So this is my phone, and these are some things that I do. I mute everybody individually, and then I'll unmute people I'm having a conversation with, and then I mute them again. And that's just a little thing that I do. I don't know if other people do the same thing, but that occurred to me. It's like, that would be something that if we're building a feature, we don't know all the different ways that people want to use it. Maybe they're already using it in a way that if we rebuild it a different way, they're going to be pissed because they want to do something with it that they're already doing, and we don't know about it because we've made assumptions. The other thing that I do is I only have 3 alarms, and I know my kid has, she just makes a new alarm every time she needs an alarm, so she's got pages and pages and screens of alarms. But I only need 3 alarms. I need to wake up, rise and glow. I really like meditation, so my meditation one is to tell myself to meditate and then tell myself to stop meditating so I don't fall asleep. And then there's usually something like I got dry stuff that I have to take out of the laundry and put in the dryer. So it's like, remember the thing. Or I'm baking something, or I've got bread on the right side. That's just one thing. So that's what I do. Does anybody else have like phone stuff? Or something that they're thinking about how they specifically set something up just to make it easier on yourself?
My screens are the way I organize them.
Okay.
So they are blocked off by kind of context. and there's only the apps that I need and maybe the widgets that I need. So like, this is my daily planning.
Focus.
And then when I wanna do social stuff, it's all here. And that way I'm never looking at the things that I don't wanna look at. I'm not distracted by, and notifications are all turned off on everything by default.
Oh.
I share that with you. I do the
have
same
zero
thing.
notifications.
I set up my screens for what I want them to be focused on,
Yeah.
whether it's my work, my entertainment screen,
Yeah.
notification.
And that, so when I wanna go like, just melt my brain and I can go to socials, I'm only looking at socials and no work stuff.
Don't be distracted. Candy.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to organize, I really like the reminders app because it's just so ingrained in a lot of the ecosystem and the tools I have. So instead of using a paid tool, I just use the reminders app for work, for groceries and things like that. It's a good place. Annoys my wife to all hell for all the alerts, but it works for me. It helps me not use post-it notes, especially if I'm traveling. I don't have all of that with me. So it's just something portable as a reminder of the things that I want to get out of my head.
I organize by like reachability. Because I don't even look at my phone, like I can just like, I know where to click.
Yeah,
And
I
so
love that.
the apps that I use more, I have it lower so that when my friend goes to it.
Is that too?
That
Yeah.
reminds me
Yeah. So this is an example of something that I'll do at the beginning of a project as well, when I know there's like certain tasks and certain features and certain kinds of themes that we want to explore a little bit. And this works well on a digital whiteboard. Kind of get together and talk about very, very specific things. So instead of maybe going broad at the beginning of a project, we're talking about something really specific, like the employee directory or something similar. And that keeps everybody on topic. We get really, really, really juicy results because we're just like really getting into something. And we discover things that maybe we wouldn't have known about at all. And adding something that maybe that people don't know about, but people have already figured out on their phones, something like that. That sometimes is the UX delight factor because you found something like that for people. Okie dokie. Yeah. Why don't we jump into sample process? So here I have linked together. I'm going to jump out of here. Does everybody have that? This is one of my shares. It's going to be a sample process. If you need the link again later, I will grab it for you. But this is just kind of a little flow chart. Is that still clear? I'll zoom in. Okay, so at the very beginning of a project, if I'm starting at the beginning, I'm going to ask what data do we have to work with, because it's remarkable how quickly you can get into a project and they've got some personas already, and maybe they have some analytics, or maybe they've got previous research, and nobody even mentions it unless you ask for it. Like, they really figure that you're just going to start fresh or something. But often bigger organizations will have something that you can work with. So I'll ask for what sort of data that they have, what kind of research questions they want to explore, because sometimes they have something in mind that they've been grappling with or trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out who the audience is that we want to work with. And one of the things that I put into the description is how to work when you don't have an audience easily accessible. So there's a couple ways of doing that. And sometimes an organization will have an internal list. And so as at a university, they maybe have faculty, B2B, they might have like a newsletter or something that goes out, so a list of contacts. Maybe it's just a larger company and they've got a lot of staff. Even though they think, well, the site, they're gonna be familiar with it, they're not really. They're not familiar enough that they're going to skew the results too much. So if no one is available, we have options of finding proxy testers. So if you're testing with prospective students, maybe you're using some current students to help fill that in, because you already know that they're people that used to be prospective students, so maybe they can put that hat on and try to remember what it was like in the past. And there's also organizations that you can use to get a pool of participants. I would say that would be my last step, the last recommendation, because sometimes the participants in the pool game the system a little bit because they know they're going to get their, $10 or whatever from doing the test, right? And this is where it can get a little tricky because now they're working for candy and they're not really thinking through if they are going to be giving you important information. So I would say try to find your accurate demographic first, and the customer will sometimes have that already. Next up would be a proxy. Similar people. I think the hardest one is if it's something super specific, like dental hygienists that also want to study law. Like something where you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I can find someone like that. So during those times, I'll go a little bit smaller. So I'll go for a smaller sample group, and I will try to connect with people that are maybe already known users, and then just try to walk through some things from their point of view. Any questions about that? So far, so good. Put your hand up anytime if you want to ask. We're just a cozy group here, so that's fine. So at this point, if we don't have any sort of information available, it might be helpful to set up some analytics or some behavior tracking. And there could be barriers to this as well because it could be a brand new site that doesn't have a lot of traffic. So even setting something up is not going to collect in time. Or it could be that we are on a super tight timeline and we're just not going to have time to do anything. So if the site has a lot of visitors, then a short period of time is okay. We can jump right in and we can start tracking stuff. If there's no site and no opportunity to set something up, maybe there's some constraints, restrictions around what we can set up, we can get a little bit creative with some surveys. So then maybe we're not using the site to track. We're going to go directly and start asking people questions. Just like we did with the survey at the beginning of this session, it can be super simple. It can just be a handful of focused questions that'll help things along. I really like the multiple choice. I like to be able to quantify because then I can use that information during a discovery session. I can use that information for insights, and I can say, we've talked to your customers or we've talked to your stakeholders, and this is the prioritization. Is that what you thought it would be? And sometimes there's surprise and there's a lot more conflict within an organization than we thought there would be, and that's an invitation to another conversation. That's an invitation to maybe talk directly to the core group and mention that there is some conflict and maybe things are a little bit blurry, that we're not as sure about something as we thought we were. And so at that time, sometimes I'll just stop and go back to the sponsor and start to talk about some of the other issues. Because sometimes it starts off as a website project and it ends up being a branding project or a product hierarchy project, or goodness knows, maybe suddenly it's a diversity project and we didn't realize any of this was happening because we were just thinking about it as a web project. Does that happen to any of you? The next stage here is looking at whether or not we have some of the established building blocks. Is there a clear vision for brand expression? Because sometimes they haven't done an update for a while, it's a bit blurry, maybe there's 100 different ways of doing something, or the site has a bunch of different styles and that's not clear. So there is an opportunity here to do a little bit of exploratory research. Interviews, focus groups, surveys will help out here to help understand your audience needs. And they both go to that because I would rather talk to the audience and see what their needs are and see what their preferences are, and then see if that aligns with the project assumptions that I've had from the beginning. If I understand their behavior, maybe I can keep going, but I think it's always valuable to go and gather a little bit more information about specifics, especially if there is like a really juicy area. Maybe it's some sort of a more complex piece of the site and we want to understand how people are using it. So something with filters, maybe search, maybe some sort of program listings, something that you could really get into and see how people are currently using it and whether or not it's meeting their needs. And then from here, we want to have a look and see if things are changing. So how much are things changing? How big of a shift will this be? Sometimes a project is a lift and shift or sold as a lift and shift, when if you actually lifted and shifted, things would just completely fall apart, right? And you can see it and you can sense it, that something is not on, it's on shaky ground. So at this point, we might look at validating the IA, doing a test with the current sitemap to show where areas are that people can't find things. So through the initial research, we might be looking at what the common tasks are for our audiences and see whether or not we can validate those. So I like to do a tree test a few times, if possible, if we have the time and the budget, to test the existing IA, then to make some, after time has passed and maybe some other research has passed, then we can test the proposed IA and see how that performs, make some tweaks to it, and then validate our final IA at the end. That would be ideal, but sometimes that is not possible. So I think what I'm saying here is just do as much as you can until you start hitting the wall. The topic structures, I don't know how much you've looked at here, but the card sort I think is very helpful in this case. So here, if you've got groupings that you want to check out and maybe create some new ways of filtering and sorting. And then the next piece here are designs changing, our user interfaces being built out, has content been added, and at this point we can test both. It's a little far away. Hello. Both a design file, so I'll show you what that looks like on my next piece here, with something like a first click. So if we don't have anything built yet and we've just got a design, is it obvious where to go? Maybe it's a new homepage. Is it obvious where to go? Are we going to send people into the right place? So this can be tested before it's built out, and then it's probably cheaper just to change the design file than to rebuild something. So that's a nice thing to do if you have time to look at the key layouts and what might need to be changed there. What information is missing, what assumptions we've made that might not be the case. And then if we do have something that's either a prototype or an early site with enough content for people to actually understand what's there, then we can do some prototype testing. This is where the usability testing comes in and the moderated task testing. I really like to do moderated task testing with just a handful of people from each audience segment. And then sometimes adding special audiences if they're available to us. So for higher education, that might be first-time learners or First Nations people or people with a disability. And just make sure that they're involved in testing as much as possible. And at this point here, sometimes things get changed and we can go back to the beginning and touch up some of the other areas that might have needed a little bit more attention. The next piece is that I wanted to share with you, and hang on, let me find where were we? My theme. There we go. This is a file to share with you with research and testing plan. So this is something with a bunch of different options that I might share with a client to start talking through. What is it that they have in mind with research and testing? Maybe they have something that they're trying to do that I'm not aware of, or that they have made assumptions about that might not be accurate. So in here, I will open up this file. Okay, and the links themselves will go to some of the tools that I use for these things. So the first piece here, the website survey, this is a way to do passive research. Again, if you have limited access to participants, something like Hotjar will give you the ability to put a little poll, and it just kind of comes up the side of the site. You've seen those before, and it has one multiple choice question or something like that. And they can be really helpful if you've got enough traffic. People are just sort of self-selecting, and they are coming in to do this themselves, and you get quite a bit of good information, and you basically don't have to do much except for just setting it up. So even if you have limited access to participants, as long as the traffic is reasonable, doing something like that can actually help with things quite a bit, especially on pages where you can actually have it show up on pages, specific pages of the site. So maybe there's a directory you're trying to test or some sort of resources area, and you're asking people why they came, what they're looking for, if they found what they were looking for today, and it can be incredibly helpful to indicate things that are difficult to find without a lot of extra research. So you can have a multiple choice option for other and have people fill in something. And sometimes that can be really helpful because people are, when they're frustrated, they want to say something. So this poll can really illuminate some of the most frustrated users because it gives them an outlet to let you know something that isn't working for them. We also have the 5-second test. So this is like the click test. I think it's a wonderful tool if you feel like the website offerings aren't quite clear. So, and you might have, has anybody actually done a 5-second test? All right, it's going to show a web page to you for 5 seconds. And this is based on the fact that people take up to 5 or 6 seconds before they click to something, and they don't really take their time to look at it. So if you've ever done a test like this, and some of these actually have a sign up to become testers. If anybody's doing any sort of testing at all, sign up for it, because then you get to see how other people are doing testing and the kind of questions and which questions make sense to you, and you get ideas for how to do some testing yourself. So you'll see a web page come up, and usually it's just an image, and you'll stare at it for a few seconds and then it's gone. And then you'd be asked a question like, what service is this website offering, or what do you remember seeing on this website? So if you ever get a design file from a client that is jumbly, that is difficult to understand, but they're like super passionate about it, this one is excellent for illuminating the fact that they need to clarify their messaging, that people don't understand what it is. So sometimes you'll see the heading, maybe their messaging isn't very clear, and it's like solutions, integrity, something, trust, and I still don't know what you do, and your 5 seconds are up. So I really love this one to just start to show how the messaging might be the weak spot. It might not be the features, and maybe it's nothing to do with usability. Maybe everything is fine, but it needs some copywriting help. So that one, great tool. The first click one is similar in that you get a few seconds, you get a question, but the design file remains up. So it might say, where do you sign up to register for this site? And you click on a location, and then on the other end, the researcher will get a heat map of the clicks. And you can see where people thought they should click in order to complete the test. And it can be really, really helpful that on a sort of just on a smaller scale, on a specific page, if people are understanding, how do you use this filter, or where would you go to complete this transaction? And it can be really helpful. You can also do this with heat mapping to kind of initially diagnose something. So if you're walking into a project where they're saying, I don't know, people are just not using this feature, Hotjar has a way of recording, and you can specifically filter out people that are engaging with a single page or a section of the site, which can be incredibly helpful, because then you can go in and you can watch videos of people clicking around in just that section. And you can kind of get an idea of something that's happening. So it'll tell you the what, but then you can augment that with interviews, with focus groups, with other research to understand why. And then if you have a solution for it, you can use that first click test to validate and measure whether or not you're headed in the right direction there. Any questions? No? Candy? They're too quiet. Sugar them up.
Work for you?
So This was the section where I was going to go to these specific questions, and there were going to be specific questions, and then I was going to read them out, and then I was going to answer them. So does anybody have any specific questions? Because there weren't any.
I've just about like we've had to like remove cookies and tracking off websites recently with client sites because they've been getting sued. You know, I guess because of like bad privacy policies and stuff like that. Is there an issue like, and we have projects coming up where it'd be awesome to like put Hotjar on it for a couple months, but if we have to rewrite all the privacy policy for 2 months, you know, like have you run into that? Is that a problem?
I've run into constraints where I can't use certain tools because of the regulations of the organization. And you kind of have to go with that, or if you don't like it, you go rogue. Yes.
Yeah, I've ran into the same issue.
Yeah.
The website I work on, we can't collect any data, especially to maintain our like certificates,
Yeah.
just because of the clients we work with.
Yeah. So I think in that case, it would be helpful to do one of two things. One being if there are specific interfaces that you're concerned about, you can take an image of it and then you can do proxy testing with a different group through a tool, and it has nothing to do with the website. We're just looking at the image of a UI and we're testing with the demographic we want to test with, and it's nothing to do with the website at all. And then the other piece might be doing moderated task testing with people who have signed the waiver, who understand what's happening, and then you can guide them through a very specific process where I do it over Zoom, I'm looking at the screen, go through the script with them and say, imagine that you're wanting to sign up for this site, what kind of questions would you have, where would you look for those questions, and we just kind of have a conversation, and I watch what they do. And you can see where the awkward spots are. So I think one of those things might work if you're not allowed to collect passively.
And if it's a matter of, that we've been delving into privacy issues, if it's a matter of a third party and not just you collecting your own data, there's a bunch of open source tools out there, Matomo being a really good one, and they have some paid plugins that you can self-host, so no one sees the data but you.
Right.
And I'd be looking at something like that, and they have heat maps and a lot of that same sort of functionality.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one. Yeah, Chuck.
But if you have a client that either doesn't think that you can get in touch with sample users to test with, or just doesn't want to spend the money doing that, how do you typically navigate that?
I don't work with them. Okay, just joking. No. Then I would go back to that original exercise where we were doing, where we're like, what do we know? What do we don't know? And then try to generate questions that I bring to the client. And then we need to put our heads together and try to figure out other alternative ways of finding the information. So maybe we are doing specialized focus groups. Maybe I'm helping them send out a survey to their own staff and employees with some ideas. I think surveys can be a lot less expensive to do, and I think it would really depend on the budget, because I mean 0 is 0, but there are some creative ways of moving forward. Is this something that you've been able to solve?
I mean, I think what you're saying makes sense. I think what happens is this reluctance to spend money or a sensitivity to the audience themselves. Maybe it's like a new product being developed and they're like, we don't want to tip our hat too early and let people know this exists, so let's not test it.
Oh, yeah. I have tested things that were anonymized, obfuscated.
Okay.
We swapped in different branding and tested a wireframe that was more generic. So that's something that can be done. Has anybody else had that experience?
I think I've seen that. Yeah.
Oh, no, okay. Well, where were we? This one. We're a little bit faster because fewer people.
Can I ask, it was my quiz thing, but it didn't make it high enough, we didn't include it, but, so, on the actionable side of things though, like, that was, a question I asked was like, how do you make when you're giving the results back or whatever, what's like a good strategy to make sure that there's actionable things? Like, I mean, some things are
Right.
obvious, like here's the new menu, that's obvious, but
Yeah. Well, I will do things in 2 steps. I will try to focus on the problem space. So instead of going directly to the solution, why don't we just put a button on that sort of thing? We will describe the problem state in more detail so that they're fully understanding what the risk, what the issue might be if we don't solve this problem. And I think that adds a little bit more urgency than just saying, I think we should do it like this, and then having a wireframe and ready to go, and it disconnects the stakeholders from the solution. One of the things that is most important to me is to bring stakeholders along, that I have buy-in the whole way, so that I don't have somebody just show up at the end and go, this is dumb, I think we should just put a carousel in. What I want to make sure is that they fully understand the problem space, and we're explaining the problems that we are solving. And then the actionable items will connect with the problems. I think a lot of the time I'll see sort of previous research that is sort of siloed, or like it doesn't tell the full story. It's talking about some sort of audiences and tasks, and it doesn't clarify what the problem is and what the value of the solution will be. So if we have a solution that meets some of the initial KPIs that we've put together, and it tracks back to those original problems that we're trying to solve, it's almost like showing your work in math. It's very difficult then to go back on something if we've drawn a direct line from your business needs, your audience needs, some of the technical constraints, problems to solve, possible solutions, tested solutions, validated solutions, and here we are. Because trying to pick that apart is much harder than, here's your project, here's your solution, and now people are like, oh, I don't like that. Well, it doesn't matter. We've tested it, and this works best for the problem that you're trying to solve. Hello. Hello. I think we can wrap up pretty soon, but thank you. You've been an awesome crowd.